A real crime. In a series of podcasts, I want you to travel down some lonely roads with me. These are the roads I traveled with families who never got to say goodbye to loved ones. These family members were fated to live the rest of their lives waiting and wondering. I will begin this series with unsolved murders, but I will also revisit cases that include arrests because aspects of the case are worth re-examining. I wrote these stories when I worked as a reporter for the Charleston Gazette. Thank you for listening today. I wish I could answer the question why as you hear this story unfold, but it was never answered in all the court hearings or court filings this case generated. When a child is only visible to other children, episode 15. A Mount Hope couple allowed a single mother and her daughter to move into their house with their children. This seems like an act of kindness, but the adults stayed silent while Joyce S. Stewart brutalized and starved her daughter. After the abused child was examined in the emergency room, the doctor wrote his diagnosis: attempted murder. Diane Lawthorne allowed her friend Joyce and Joyce's then 13-year-old daughter to move into the house she shared with her husband and their 5 children. Soon Joyce started what she called discipline on her child. After about 6 months of this discipline, here is what an emergency room doctor put in his report. The first exam shows that this child has the most incredible and complete bruising of her entire body that can be imagined. She has extensive bruising extending from the top of her head all the way down through her trunk, stomach, and down into her lower legs. The doctor found bite marks and bed sores. The doctor said the bite marks were from a human mouth. The child also suffered a broken skull. As part of the discipline, she was tied down for 2 or 3 days at a time, and she could barely move. This produced oozing sores. Her mother hit her with belts, fists, and kicked her. Her mother also gave her chores like cleaning that she must perform, and if her mother thought she did poorly, she was punished further. Her mother also made her do the cleaning naked. The doctor wrote that the child suffered regular beatings for at least 6 months. He noted that the last 2 weeks of this discipline saw a serious increase to the number of beatings. The child also suffered blunt abdominal trauma with contusions to her liver and spleen, her left ear punctured, the child was anemic and unwashed. The mother deprived the child of food for as long as 3 days in a row. Apparently, Mr. and Mrs. Lawhorn could sit down and enjoy a meal without thinking of the starving and invisible child under their roof. Luckily, their children could see the 13-year-old clearly. In secret, the children brought her food. In fact, after police and social workers arrived, they learned that the smaller Lawhorn children were able to sneak food to the otherwise invisible child. The abuse began toward the end of a school term. Once school was out, the abuse escalated. Before they were able to help the invisible child escape, the children tried to open their parents' eyes. Once this case came to Fayette County Circuit Court, the father said that if he and his wife left the house, their children would meet them when they returned and say, "You've got to get in there and do something. Joyce is at it again." But apparently, the father was never able to see the invisible child. Thankfully, the children who could see the injury so vividly helped the invisible child to run to a neighbor's house. We can also be thankful that the neighbor had the ability to see the invisible child. After an investigation, the 3 adults were named in a 32-count indictment. As I said from the beginning, an answer to the question of why was never answered in court or any filings. But I think Fayette County Circuit Judge John Hatcher was accurate. There can be no reasonable explanation, he said from the bench. The judge also pointed out that emergency room doctors see untold amounts of pain and suffering, but they were shocked, the judge said. When the mother, Joyce Stewart, was brought to court, she admitted she saw runny, oozing sores on her daughter. Stewart, who was 34 at the time she was arrested, also admitted she bit her child and hit her with a belt. In court, Stewart entered guilty pleas to 5 counts of the 32-count indictment all adults were charged in. Prosecutors explained they were willing to dismiss other counts to spare the daughter from testifying. Leo Lawhorn Jr. never abused the child, but he admitted in court he did nothing to stop it. He entered a guilty plea to 1 count of a multi-count indictment. Mr. Lawhorn brought a black Bible with him when he came to court. In court, Diane Lawhorn admitted she spanked the 13-year-old once. Her reasoning, she told the judge, if she spanked the child, she would be easier on her than her mother would be. She pleaded guilty to 3 counts of the 32-count indictment. Diane Lawhorn carried a beige Bible when she came to court. Sobbing, Diane Lawhorn told the judge, "I should have taken up for the little girl." In court, Mrs. Lawhorn also told the judge she had seen the 13-year-old tied down. Both Lawhorns asked for forgiveness. I saw parallels in this case and the one I wrote about last week about the beating death of Derek Dale Browning. Both children were literally beaten from head to toe. In both cases, a biological parent was an abuser. Derek was beaten to death. I believe that the 13-year-old in Mount Hope would also have been beaten to death if the other children in the house did not help rescue her. The beatings of the 13-year-old were escalating, the emergency room doctor pointed out. The kindness and the bravery of the other children in the house has always moved me. Unsuccessfully, they asked their parents to intervene. In secret, they brought food to the beaten and tied down child. They had seen Stewart beat her daughter. I am sure they feared she would hit them too if she saw them bringing in food. If Stewart had hurt the Lawhorn children, I wonder if their parents would have acted. Finally, when the coast was clear, the children helped the 13-year-old flee the house. I'm so grateful to the neighbor who immediately took the child to the emergency room. If the neighbor had refused to help, what an added level of tragedy. By the time the police and prosecutors got involved, the child was in foster care and doing as well as could be expected. As a society, I hope our eyes are always open to the needs of children. Thanks again for listening, and Tommy Siner for his always great work. Please join me again Wednesday for a new episode of A Real Crime with Susan Williams.